We good to go? Yeah. Good to go. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matis Karate. I'm a VP of Product at Sage. I work in the Finance and ERP division, so working with products like Sage X3 and Sage Intacct. I've been asked to present by our lovely colleagues at Percipient, who are one of our VARs, our value-added resellers. They actually are an award-winning VAR, having been the Sage Intacct Partner of the Year in 2024. So thank you very much for inviting me, and come see them at the end. I think they're over there. Booth 20? 22, there we go. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the applications of AI in finance, and I'm going to do that. I also talk a little bit about generative AI, and, that's a little bit about an elephant in the room, right? So everyone, it's kind of difficult to have avoided that topic in the last few years, ever since large AI models like ChatGPT have arrived and been available to all people. That's really kind of brought it to the front of the public. And yes, I'm going to apologize. Pretty much all of the artwork in this presentation has been created by DALL-E, which is, as you should know, a generative AI for art. So if you think it looks a little bit funny, I didn't make it. So let's go through it. So some definitions first. What is generative AI? So generative AI is just a capability of AI to create content, right? And that content can be text, that content can be images, that content can be voiced. And within that, so this is, I'm trying to just jargon bust a little bit for you. You may have heard of LLMs, which stand for large language models. And so these are a type of generative AI that are used to process a huge amount of data that when they're interfaced with, typically by text, sometimes also voice, albeit that's just another translation into a text format, they can then start making predictions, they can start making responses, and you can start having a sort of human-like conversation with them. But what's important to note is that these have all been built on foundations that have been existing for a long time, right? The concepts of AI, the concepts of machine learning have been around for a long time, and these are just new applications of it that have, kind of come to the forefront in the last 2-3 years in terms of, obviously, have been researched for a long time, but come into sort of the public consciousness in the more recent years. So let's take a step back. And this is where sort of generative AI starts to get a little bit interesting. Technology historically has not been able to reason. And so this is a fun little example of that. It's mobile notifications on your phone. There's probably some people here who've played Pokemon Go, or certainly have had children who have played Pokemon Go, right? So it's a game where you run around and you go outside and you collect Pokemon, et cetera, et cetera. It's sort of an augmented reality game. And it wants you to go outside, right? But at the same time, there's a tornado warning. Right? And so technology has been great, but it hasn't been really able to reason. It hasn't been able to take a step back and go, okay, actually, maybe these two things aren't. And this is a bit of it's a bit of a silly example of it, but in terms of sort of brings that to life. So when did we at Sage become sort of conscious of this? So my CTO is a gentleman called Aaron Harris. He was also a founder of the product Intacct that Sage acquired back in August 2017. He had so this is very much his story, but he's given me permission to tell it. He had received a sort of an early license into ChatGPT, and he wanted to spend an afternoon with it. So, many of you probably have an Alexa type app device at home, and you've probably yourself or your children have asked it to tell it a joke. Tell me a joke, Alexa, and it will tell you a joke based off a list of jokes that it's aware of. You can somewhat tell it a topic. And so one of the things he went, okay, ChatGPT, can I, tell me a joke? And it told him a joke. But then it did something that surprised him. It asked him to tell it a joke. And so he told her a joke about a skeleton that walks into a bar and says, I'd like a beer and a mop, please. And then ChatGPT went, oh, that's quite funny. And then proceeded to explain why that joke is funny. And that's when he was like, oh, okay, this is slightly different. We've not seen things like this before. And that's when he sort of started sharing it within us, sort of at a product leadership level and at Sage around, hey, this is something that we should start taking a look at. And so the things that, starting to see is that AI can reason and AI can start to understand the world. And that some of that may still be a bit of an illusion. It may not be, we're not quite there yet, but that's kind of the direction of travel that we're heading into. And there's a reason for that. So there are two sort of main school of thoughts for AI historically. Symbolic AI is what we've been working on for a long time. So at Sage, we've been deploying AI capabilities into our products for over 10 years, right? And a lot of those are things that you would take for granted. They're linked to being able to better recognize invoices when we ingest them, so that you put them in once and then the next time we know it. Or everyone has suppliers in common, so if we've seen it before with another customer who has the same supplier, then obviously we should take that learning and understand it from yours, because the format should be the same, and it's just the values that differ. So that kind of stuff, that's called symbolic AI. It's based on rules, it's based on processes, and it's very good at that kind of recognition. That has changed from a research perspective, and that's where connectionist AIs come in, and it's basically biologists got involved in AI research, and they started trying to build AI models that resembled neural nets, and basically resembled what the human brain looked for. Because one of the things that symbolic AI couldn't do very well was see patterns and sort of understand and predict that, and that's where connectionist AI, and obviously I'm giving you a very high-level summary of this, and there's oodles of research papers that you can read about it, but it's that effectively starting to try and model the human brain that has allowed us to sort of create that sort of next step in this AI development, and all the sort of the hype that you're hearing about generative AI. But one thing, so taking a little step back, and this is a sort of a model that I like to think about, is that there's a difference between invention and discovery. So when you create, and the best example of this is the light bulb, which is an example of an invention, and electricity, which is an example of discovery. Electricity has always been there, right? That concept has always existed, but we discovered it, and then all of a sudden we were like, okay, well, what are all the applications of it? We didn't know, right? When we first discovered electricity, that created sort of a generational shift in technology going forward, but that shift took time, right? The actual applications of that discovery were not things that were immediately apparent when electricity was first discovered. Compared to an invention, something like a light bulb, well, when we invented a light bulb, it was to create light, right? And the use cases for that are far more obvious, and the market for it was far more easy to define from the onset. And AI, more generally, and then generative AI itself, is very much more in that discovery stage. And the reason why I'm spending a minute to explain this to you is that we are still in that stage of like, okay, well, we've discovered this capability. What are we going to do with it? What are the actual applications? Not obviously, and here we're going to talk a little bit about and sort of double click into the finance world, but just generally across our society, how are we going to use this new discovery to sort of, to change the way that we work today and change our lives more generally? So let's talk a little bit about generative AI and one of the reasons why it's not going to go away. And this is a little quote that I like, and it's, how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways, slowly and then very suddenly. So why suddenly? So here I'm going to permit myself to read off a couple of stats, so I make sure I give them to you properly. But there are 4 main drivers for why generative AI is A, not going away, and B, is going to continue to accelerate. The first one's computing power, and here I'll give you the stats. So the cost of computing power has gone down from about 70% every single year from when ChatGPT first launched. So that went from trying to train a model on ChatGPT 3 went from $4.6 million in 2020 to about $700K in 2024. And so so the availability of that and the accessibility of that means that it's becoming more and more affordable to do it. Available data, there were about 10,000 models in 2020. There were over 1 million of them today. So again, and what becomes interesting with that, and they kind of present these slightly, well, that then tied to 3 and 4, is that the pricing for those models is consumption, and therefore the barrier to entry becomes relatively straightforward. And the second one is that they're open source. So a lot of these models are shared. You don't have to go back and recreate another model. You can go and use someone else's, and you can pay for it on a consumption model. And so that is creating the ability for developers like ourselves and even sort of even smaller tech vendors to actually start saying, okay, well, let's start experimenting with this capability within our product, and it not costing them millions of dollars to do that development. There's a whole myriad of things that they can leverage. A very common conversation that you have whenever you speak to AI is, what does that mean for people, right? And you can Google AI replaces people and you'll find millions and millions of articles, and it's a well-known trope. That's not what we believe at Sage. We think you won't be replaced by AI. However, you'll be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI better than you. And that's very much where we think about that adoption of AI is around as a term that Microsoft have created, which I think we generally believe is going to become the name of the area. Just like you have some people call vacuum cleaners Hoovers or Kleenex tissue papers Kleenex. The concept of a co-pilot, and you can call it an assistant. Other names apply, but that sort of ability to use AI to empower a human and work with them is going to be a much more powerful concept than the white robot is going to replace all of us. And so that kind of creates, let's start diving into the sort of the AI and finance use cases, and that's how I'm going to sort of end this presentation in a minute. Is we kind of see two real areas for where this becomes interesting. Bringing accounting and finance capabilities outside of accounting products, right? And so enabling other users, finding users where they operate before, and going from very simple automation, right? We've been able to automate workflows in software for a long time, but moving to more autonomous workflows that are still guided by a human, where the human is still part of that process. And in fact, so let's talk about number one. So we're going from operating into somewhere like this, which is to finding people where they work, right? So that could be within, obviously depending on the people's tech stacks, Microsoft Teams, Slack, your SMS messages, and starting to bring some of that workflow outside of the ERP solutions and into areas where potentially not the power users who will want to stay and have to do a lot of things in their product, but the more occasional users can start interacting with it without having to log into their into the actual ERP. This slide is a little busier. I'm not sure if you guys get slides at the end, but I'm hoping you do. But it kind of talks about how we're thinking. So Sage is not just a mid-market company in terms of customers we sell to. We also sell to sort of startups and small businesses, and we generally see that the application of AI and generative AI is part of that into this world. Goes around from basically taking people out of manual time-consuming processes. For the small business, it's more about just making that go away so that they can focus on things that aren't finance, right? Because they wear lots and lots of different hats, and finance is typically not their first priority, right? There's 100 different things they need to do in their small business. And then in our space, in the mid-market space, and obviously also in hospitality, it's around allowing you and your finance teams to become more strategic, right? Stop being a backwards-looking organization that has to close and then do analysis. To can you become more real-time, and then can you also become more forward-looking? And then accountants is another very big part of our market, so that's another area where we want to help accountants be more more on the advisory side. Obviously they still work for clients to do their books, but be, again, more of that strategic advisor kind of concept. This is a slide I like a lot. I'm going to have to credit my CTO again for it. But this is our technology North Star at Sage. And this is where, generative AI is a piece of it, but it's around, where we see there's the applications of this technology to kind of create 3 continuous cycles. Continuous accounting, and that's around trying to eliminate the close and bring the close period as quickly as possible. Continuous trust, so that's around trying to eliminate audit processes and have make audit more real time within your systems. And then continuous insights, and that's kind of what I've just mentioned around sort of bringing your ability to report on real-time data, and also bringing in more and more forward-looking data so that you're making more strategic, informed decisions with your business, and you as finance leaders are seen as a strategic advisor to the rest of your leadership team. And this basically underpins all of our technology investment, not just AI. So let's go into a few scenarios. So scenario number 1, so this is all going to talk about some, we're going to keep it generic, some imaginary co-pilot. I did have versions of these where I could sort of click through the product with you, but I thought that was a little bit too much detail especially in the time that we have. So I've kind of keep this a little bit more, keep these a little bit more descriptive. But there's the concept of, you're an AP clerk, so let's call her Sarah. She logs into her finance system, and all of a sudden, Copilot pops up and goes, "Hi, Sarah. Here's a bunch of things I did whilst you were offline," right? And I've got, some of them I've done, and I just would like you to review. Some of them I don't understand, and I need you to help me with. And so let's see some examples of that. So Copilot has processed 15 invoices. and then offers the action to, please, can you approve them? Can you have a look at them? It's automatically chased a bunch of employees that that are earlier on in the approval workflow than Sarah herself, and reminded them that they haven't improved these open invoices. Again, shows her a list, but in this case, no action for her because the workflow hasn't reached her yet. Has created a number of payments that it wants her to approve, and then has also reached out to a few vendors where we're like, oh, got the invoice, looked at that, and then realized that actually we don't have appropriate tax information for these customers, so has gone out and chased them on her behalf. Again, visibility here for Sarah in case she wants to go query any of this, and also some workflows for her to approve. And then it's found things that it doesn't understand. So one of the concepts, we'll talk about trust to close this session, but for me, there's two elements of trust here. Creating AI solutions that you don't trust, right? Where, so I think everyone here has experienced it. We have it in some systems that we use ourselves, where you submit something, it analyzes it, and it comes back all wrong, right? And that actually creates even less trust into a system than if you had you'd manually keyed it all yourself. And so being able to have that capability to go, here's what we've done, here's where we reviewed it, this is high confidence, so we'd just like you to approve it, but this is low confidence, and so actually we would like, please support me and teach me, with then the concept of it then learning from that, and therefore you will only have so many low confidence results until they become high confidence one, is kind of key to how we create trust in AI powered capabilities. And so here are some examples of that. There's an invoice that's come in, but the vendor's not approved yet. There's another invoice that's come in, but it's substantially larger, and this is where you kind of start bringing in that context capability. It's like, hey, normally these are $1,000 invoices or £1,000 invoices. Why all of a sudden is this £15,000? Which could be for a very legitimate reason, right? There's that, but it's still worthy of flagging. It's still worthy of having that human interaction. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Another example, this is a hotel manager called Kate, and there is a need to accrue an open purchase order linked to a number of, accrue a number of purchase order that is going to be is a multi-period one, and Copilot not only comes and chases her, but also goes, historically, this is how many invoices this is what invoices have looked like for that vendor, and then suggests, based on that experience, I suggest you accrue this much against it. And Kate goes, okay, I understand that, and approves it. And then everything else in terms of, but this experience is happening in Microsoft Teams. Sorry, that was the important part I should have said at the start. Or Slack or whatever other sort of tool you're using in your solution. So it's not requiring Sarah to log into a finance system to have this kind of experience. Ditto, now going on to the operational side, you have a maintenance worker. They haven't filled their timesheets. And this is all around, as you can see, automating chasing, right? Spending a lot of time chasing employees, chasing colleagues to get them to provide data that you need to get, to do one of the workflows in your business. And so this is for, Tom. He's a maintenance employee. He hasn't filled in his timesheet. So Copilot sends him an SMS and goes, you've not filled in your timesheet. Log in here to do it. Oh, and by the way, we can see there's a gap here, but actually when we look at the HR system, and this is where you can start connecting multiple systems, we can see that actually you were on PTO. So, actually we've pre-populated part of your timesheet with holiday because that's what we can see, and can you confirm that that's correct and approve it, do it in a text message, never needs to access any kind of system. And then lastly, she does have a name, a finance director of a hotel chain, right, has multiple hotels, and Copilot comes up to her and says, oh, by the way, we're ahead of forecast. And so then gives reasons for why we're ahead of forecast, right? So our utility bills across multiple of our locations have been lower, and one of our locations is overperformed. Excellent, that's interesting. And then shows a nice pretty graph, and this is where the mocked up versions I have would, sort of that's where the generative AI capabilities come in and would see through the air, thank you. But then I pressed the blackout screen, apologies. And then goes further than that and goes, oh, okay, well, you've got this. Here's 3 suggestions on how we could spend this extra cash, right? So we've seen, your marketing ROI is excellent, so why don't we spend a little bit more money on that? We've got a credit note with an outstanding balance, which we could pay in ahead and get some savings there. Or actually, we've got some planned maintenance on one of our locations that we had for next month. Why don't we bring that forwards, right? And so brings Jane those various examples, looking at data across its systems to make that suggestion for, again, the human to make that final decision. So I'll leave you with a concept, common words. We've talked about it a little bit already in this presentation. I don't trust it. I don't, And I've kind of already given you the answer to what we think about that, but ultimately we see that these are capabilities that will help automate processes, but in the end, a human is always going to be accountable. Or if you want a more pithy way of saying this, and this white text doesn't work as well when I see this live, is AI is not going to be signing your audit reports. You still are. So thank you very much. If you'd like to come see Percipient or myself, I'll be here till about 2, 3 o'clock. We're on booth, 22, not 20. Apologies. I know we started a little late. Do we still want to do questions? Or what's the? Not that I'm trying to dodge them. And if. No? Oh, one over there. Ours, we've just launched it in early adopter, yes. We've just launched the early adopter. It has been live in our small business products for 9 months. In Intact, it's just gone into early adopter this week. So we have 25 customers testing it right now.
And is it an add-on or is it
It's native to Intact. It will be paid. We will eventually charge for it. Right now, no. It's in early adopter. So.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, of those 4 scenarios you just outlined, how much of that is actually available now, and how much is of that is a kind of vision of what you see happening in the future, and if so, over what sort of timescale?
Mostly vision. In terms of our own products, which is what I'll complete. So we've had a Sage. So I tried to keep this less Sage branded and less advertising Sage generally. So in terms of our Sage Copilot, we've been starting with simpler use cases with smaller businesses, right? Because they're easier to kind of create. Obviously, as you go further up market, complexity comes in, and that's where and kind of want to crawl before we can walk, before we can run. We just launched 2 use cases for generative AI into Intact a couple of weeks ago, and they are in testing. So, because, and this come back to my sort of discovery versus invention piece, right? This is still early. We as vendors are still trying to figure out, we don't want to just slam in and be like, hey, cool, we've got a Copilot and it's great. If it doesn't add value, it's not interesting, right? So the 2 use cases that we have are one around, we've loaded our entire search function into an LLM, which now makes our product search way more interesting to interact with, because you can actually ask our search questions and it will answer you, and then with links and sort of like that. So that's a really cool use case. It's on the periphery, but it's it is still seen in terms of bringing on new users, or when we launch new functionality, educating existing users. So that's one that we're very excited on. The other one's around the example that I gave around the being ahead on forecasts. That's the one that we have live already. Is it as sophisticated in terms of bringing every single example of how you can spend the money? No, we've been initially focused on it, understanding why you have overperformance, and now we're working on trying to do that session. But for us, this is a very iterative process. We've launched Copilot with 25 customers, so we're very much still in that co-development phase. And the fun thing is, because we're an international, we're doing it across multiple countries at the same time. If you have any more questions, I'll be at the